Welcome back to another episode of Beyond Reps. In this episode, we want to break down the top 10 best gym exercises of all time. So, you might have heard Chris Bumstead's top 10 exercises, you might have heard Ryan Terry's, you might have heard Phil Heath's, but you haven't heard mine and Charlie's. So, stay along to the end and we'll reveal those. But first off, Charlie, how are you?
I am all good, mate. Yeah, we've had a bit of a break from the pod, but excited to be back. Week 9 of photo shoot prep now, so definitely getting stuck into it. And yeah, I'm starting to feel it now. So had a week off for skiing, back into training this week, and it's noticeably much more challenging. So energy levels are dropping off. Gym performance, it's still the same, but I can tell there is a difference, and hunger is starting to increase as well. So it's very interesting, but I'm definitely looking forward to getting stuck into this episode. 10 best exercises. We do have a list of exercises to go through, and we've both got a different selection. But yeah, it's interesting to see our points on what's previously been discussed, and then also where we're going to take it. How are you? You've just started prepping yourself, haven't you?
Yeah, so obviously was skiing last week, which was absolutely amazing. Really, really enjoyed it. Definitely got to get it booked in again for next year. And then, yeah, coming back. So I've kind of timed it quite well in the sense that I'm now going into a cut. So I've changed up my training program as well. Just started dropping into a calorie deficit. So although this first week back was probably supposed to be more aimed at just getting to know my new gym routine, which isn't hugely different. I've just swapped out a few exercises here and there. I've decided that I still just want to push to failure. And still really want to push myself and lay out some baseline figures really to then kind of get afterwards later on in the series. So what I've kind of really noticed really coming back from it is just like the delayed onset muscle soreness is ridiculous. Like I obviously track my muscle soreness on OneFit. That's the app that I use to coach clients and coach myself. And normally I don't really touch fours or even a five. I'm normally like twos or threes because obviously when you're very used to the training program, you don't really see that high level of DOMs. But yeah, I am sore. Like I am. This is a day off today, Thursday, so it's a rest day. Definitely feeling pretty sore. Legs are still absolutely caning if I flex my quads right now. So yeah, definitely noticed that quite a bit, but also really enjoying the shift in body weight. So just prior to skiing, which is about 10 days ago or so, I was 95.5. Came back from skiing at 94.2. I think it was 94.2 or 94.3, and then dropped down to 93.3 earlier on this week. And then I had a slight bump up today back to 93.7. I ate quite late yesterday. Calorie wise, I've gone down to about 2,500 calories. It's like 220 protein, probably like 200 carb or so, and then some fats in there off the top of my head. I've just used this week really to work on actually adjusting foods and getting used to tracking macros again on my fitness pal. It's not something that I've done for a while. I've intuitively bulked, which is definitely not appropriate, but it's the habits you get into when you've been training for so long and you know your body. And it's just been that sort of change in approach. So like bacon's come out of the food, bacon medallions have gone in, semi-skimmed milk's come out, skimmed milk's gone in, and I've just been making those adjustments. Had my first salad today, which was the
Nice.
first salad I've had for a very, very long time. Threw in some additional cooked chicken just to try and like bump up the protein. So yeah, I'm feeling a little bit hungry, I've definitely got a lot more gears to go through in terms of step count. Like I'm on about probably about 5,000 steps at the minute, so I wouldn't say I've gone hell for leather straight away first week. I've probably just eased myself into it a little bit, but we're still seeing a nice change in body weight. And then I've got plenty of tools left in the toolbox, so I can pump up steps. I haven't even dropped in cardio yet or anything like that. So I just want to sort of see where we go for this first week, lay out some baseline measurements in terms of where we are from a body weight standpoint, and then where we are from a macro standpoint. Get used to the adjustments in food, and then we'll kind of turn up the heat probably going into next week and the week after. But the biggest thing that I've really enjoyed first day when I shifted about zero point 0.8 kilos or so. Instantly the next morning, went to weigh myself, saw I dropped zero point 0.8 kilos, looked in the mirror, and the cheeks had like very slightly gone down. I was not as puffy, and I was actually looking at a previous recording before I hopped on the pod now, and yeah, we were looking puffy, bro. But yeah, I'm enjoying the fact that Skeletor's well away at the minute, but like he's definitely coming back. Hopefully, he'll pick up the memo at some point, and I'll get my face back. I think that's the biggest thing for me, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I can 100% relate to the muscle soreness. So taking a week off for skiing, now back into training this week, it's definitely much more noticeable. Trained legs on Tuesday. It's now Thursday and my legs are still sore and I've got to train them again tomorrow. So that's not going to be fun. It's quite interesting the different approaches we're taking. So we both obviously started at a similar point. Pre-skiing, I was 86.2 kilos, and then post skiing I was 86.5, I think, but then today I was 85.1. So within the matter of a few days, I've literally dropped a kilo, and it's relatively straightforward. That's kind of what we were expecting anyway. If I came back lighter, then it would have been fantastic. It would have been fantastic, and if I stayed the same weight, then it's not going to cause any issues. But yeah, we've taken obviously a bit of a different approach. We have gone more balls to the wall from the off, so calories dropped to 2100. Cardio was implemented from the start, and steps at 10,000, but that hasn't changed since the beginning. So it's nice to see that consistent drop in the scale weight. Obviously, it's going to plateau at some point, but it is just nice to see those consistent drops, knowing that there isn't changes coming because we're already doing a lot. Obviously, at some point, if changes do come, then I am prepared for it. I know I can do extra cardio, I can get some extra steps in, and there is wiggle room for food as well. Um, but yeah, it's definitely more enjoyable to feel a little bit lighter and feel less puffy. So you obviously saw the rig when we were skiing, and pre-skiing I was very bloated, very just felt very large. And then skiing I just felt very nimble, and I actually felt like I had a decent rig, which is nice. And even in the gym, like obviously without a pump is nothing impressive, but you get a pump. Today I was in the gym training an upper session and the delts were popping, bicep veins were about to explode through my arm, and it is just a very nice feeling. The Skeletor is definitely coming, and we've got about 8 or 9 weeks to go, so it's going to be interesting to see what point I get to.
I'm so surprised that you gained half a kilo when you were skiing, because like fair play to yourself, like you was going up every morning doing like fasted cardio. You would then go out for the day and ski. You would mostly just have like a really small breakfast, if any, or just have like caffeine and then like just go ski the rest of the day. I think you had like one small dessert the whole time you was there. So my mind's a bit blown about how you've gained half a kilo, because I've never seen someone
Yeah,
more dedicated. So you're obviously taking it really seriously. And I think that the difference in our approaches is probably due to the fact that you've got a photo shoot which you've paid for, and that's an extrinsic goal. And we've touched on that before in the pod, about how much that deadline is something that we're really working towards. I'm working towards the loose deadline of a random festival in summer, Junction Two, and like it would be great if I was lean for that. But it's not like the real extrinsic focus that you've got on at the minute. So yeah, I can see like obviously a little bit of a different approach, but I think I'll turn up the heat as we get further into it. Obviously, initially when you lose weight, because I was at 95.5 kilos, if I do anything, I'll lose weight basically. Like I had to really battle to stay on that to have that sort of mass and to stay at that sort of level. So the fact that I've already seen a decent shift in body weight is decent. So I'm pretty happy with that. So yeah, well, there's plenty of tools in the toolbox, but I'll definitely be turning up as we go on.
yeah, absolutely. And I was quite baffled by the increase in scale weight, but I knew it was only half a kilo, and I was surprised it wasn't lower. But then to see it come straight back down the following day, I would assume it's a bit of water retention from the travel stress that we experienced, but then also a lot of sleep disruption as well. Sleep while we were there wasn't too great, and obviously it was a lot of very stodgy food. So I think I did mention to you while we were there, digestion wasn't as good as it could have been. I came back 2 days later, normal food, normal routine, and yeah, my bowel movements were pretty regular, to say the least. So it's good to feel normal again, and scales are dropping consistently, which is always nice.
Glad to hear it. I mean, that Geneva airport trip was just unnecessarily stressful. I mean, they had like loads of staff around, but no one on the check-in desk. And obviously, some random people ages ago voted for Brexit, so that's just fucked everyone over. To be honest, I think that's fair to say. I don't think there's anyone else who really sort of stays on the opinion of that was a good thing. But yeah, so that obviously just ruined the whole trip home. We were literally like almost the last ones on the plane, and I'm not surprised that you've retained some water weight. That drive home as well from Luton, I was just knackered, to be honest. Obviously, I was
Yeah.
taking you home, and I was so tired. I literally got home, just fell asleep, woke up, watched some of the rugby, and then just went back to sleep again. I was just absolutely fucked.
Yeah, it was a very exhausting day. Like we were up relatively early, and the travel stress started from the off, really. So it was never going to be a good day. So to then have a lot of um, disruptions, shall we say, when we got to the airport, and then for you to have to drive back, like solid work. You did 3 hours in France/Geneva, and then 3 hours back in the UK. So I'm not surprised why you were sleeping all day. I pretty much did similar. I got back, I had some food, and I pretty much went to bed. Didn't do anything exciting at all, but I feel like it was definitely needed. But the trip overall was worth it.
Oh, the trip was definitely worth it. I mean, what was probably most impressive about that trip back towards the end in terms of the stress was the impossible Frenchman who repeatedly just said it was impossible for us to get out of that car park. And then, lo and behold, eventually we got out of the car park after a ridiculous amount of stress in the morning. We had a plane to catch. Yeah, that wasn't fun. And then driving around in like a foot of snow up near Tyne or Teen. It was yeah. I'd like to leave a bit earlier next time. Let's put it that way and be a bit more prepared.
Yeah, absolutely. That's that we made the impossible possible that day. That was quite entertaining, and we were definitely cutting it short. But it was always good that we weren't the only ones that were delayed on the flight, so it made it a little bit easier, but still cutting it fine. Actually getting to the gate to board, but we made it home safely, which is the main thing.
One thing that isn't going to cause anyone any stress after this episode is the fact that they're not going to be asking themselves the question, what are the top 10 best gym exercises of all time? Because that's what we're going to answer. So I thought we'd start off with Ryan Terry's exercises here. So this was on Modern Wisdom. I'm sure you guys have obviously all watched it, the listeners. I'm sure that they're similar to myself and consume that sort of content. So Ryan Terry's top 10 exercises. So these are in like no particular order. These are the exercises which he has chosen based on the fact that he wants to build as much amount of muscle across the course of his life. So these are the only 10 exercises that he can perform. That's kind of the context behind it. So he has chosen deadlift, barbell bench press, that's questionable, squats, hanging leg raises, incline dumbbell press, dumbbell shoulder press, lying leg curls, seated calf raises, overhead cable tricep extensions with a rope, and then close grip pull-ups. So I think first off, I mean, credit for him for choosing a deadlift, but as a someone, our take on this is very much physique based, not just sort of like longevity and strength based. We're trying to build muscle here. I would. Ryan Terry's obviously a Mr. Olympia. He knows exactly what he's on about. In my absolutely amateur, twice competing in Natural Bodybuilding Federation's experience and coaching for like a year or so, I would say the deadlift is not an optimal exercise for hypertrophy. It's a great exercise for building strength. It's a great exercise for longevity. But I would definitely question the deadlift's right to be on that list. I would also question the barbell bench press as well. It's a terrible exercise for building your chest. I mean, yeah, and the fact that he's got an incline dumbbell bench press in there as well. So there's a lot of chest exercises. Barbell bench press just is arguably one of the worst exercises for building a chest, or one of the least effective exercises. You can still build a chest with it, yes, okay. And there's lots of people out there who have big chests and they just bench, and that's fine. It works for them. That's fine. But I think just biomechanically, there is so many better exercises. Just like using a flat dumbbell press would be better. You get a better contraction, a better squeeze, you get a better stretch. It also allows for more individual variability if you've got like one shoulder which is slightly internally rotated than the other, or that sort of stuff. Because a barbell is a very fixed bar path. So yeah, and the fact that it's flat as well, I would always encourage like certainly my male clients who are looking to build their upper chest, or like top line as sometimes it's referred to. You want to hit your incline movements. Like that's the key there. You want to be targeting your front delt, upper chest, clavicular fibers, sorry, across that area. So that to me is very, very questionable. Squats, I mean, yeah, I can see that as a potential full body exercise, but again, my personal preference is call me. To be fair, I squatted for like 8 years, 9 years solid, so I can say that I've safely done enough squats, more squats than probably most people in the world. However, I think biomechanically, I've got very long femurs. I've got very poor dorsiflexion or ankle flexibility, and I find that when I start to go too heavy on squats, I end up using a lot of like lower back rather than sort of quads, glutes, hamstrings. So yeah, in my opinion, again, a very inefficient exercise for squats. I mean, what's your thoughts on that, Charlie?
Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat as you. Deadlifts, they're just not a very good exercise for hypertrophy. It's great for moving a lot of weight and to actually fuel your ego a little bit, but it offers very little for the risk that it's actually comes with. So obviously I've sustained a lower back injury. Deadlifting is off the cards for me. The second I touch a barbell or some dumbbells in the form of deadlift, my lower back's like, yeah, we're kicking in now, and it's just not a fun time. So it's quite intriguing that someone of his caliber has picked that. But then there is a lot of compound movements in his program overall. So obviously you are limited to 10 exercises, which does limit your selection. But barbell bench press is, as you said, one of the worst exercises for building your chest. And the fact that he's got an incline dumbbell bench press in there as well is kind of, there's too much chest exercise in there, and it's just what value would both of those bring that one doesn't. If anything, the incline double bench press is going to be better because, as you said, it's going to target the top line a little bit more and it offers more individual variability. And I think it's just better overall from a comfort perspective. Like if you load up loads of weight on the barbell, you're probably going to need a bit of a spotter, whereas dumbbells you can bail out relatively easily. And it just doesn't really make sense why barbell bench press is in there. Same with squats. Like we now know that there's a whole host of exercises you can pick over squats. Granted, they are a full body exercise in terms of your lower body, but that's only to a certain extent. And if you could get something better that removes other issues out of the way, like for me, similar to you, I don't enjoy squatting anymore because I've found alternatives that work better for me and my lower back issues. And I think if someone was to come in and do all of these exercises, one, they're going to be very fatigued from a neuromuscular perspective, like the central nervous system is going to be fried. But also, there's a lot of complications that can come with these exercises, like the technique variability with a deadlift alone. There's so many cues that you need to be able to do a good deadlift. If you're not being coached through that and figuring out how to do it properly, then chances are you're going to fuck yourself up, and then that's going to carry over into the squats, and then chances are barbell bench press you're probably not going to enjoy it anyway, because like we see a lot of times in the gym, you're just going to be loading up loads of weight, you're going to do 2 reps and then you're going to sack it off because you're just not getting stronger. So I think it definitely comes down to knowing what you're doing. Maybe he's just picked these because it's what he enjoys, but they're definitely not the best exercises from a muscle building perspective, which obviously he is going for because being Mr. Olympia or a professional bodybuilder, that's what they're aiming for.
Yeah, I feel like he's kind of stuck with the basics for those first 3, so squat, bench, deadlift. Like that's kind of like he's gone for a fundamentals approach there, which I wouldn't say is optimal for muscular hypertrophy. But like, obviously, what the hell do we know? We're just a load of nobodies just trying to critique a Mr. Olympia's work. And I'm a massive fan of Ryan Terry, by the way, in case like anyone
Yeah.
listeners thinks that I'm not. I'm a huge fan of him. He's a Brit. I've followed his careers pretty much since I've started lifting. Obviously, recently won the Mr. Olympia, so I've got huge respect for him. Now, this is just a bit of fun to kind of give our own thoughts on it as well. I mean, I do agree with the hanging leg raises on there, though. I definitely think that is one of the best ab exercises you could do. I definitely think that you can have some very slight variation to that form in order to engage like obliques as well. So yeah, I think I'm very happy that exercise in there. I'm also pleased to see the dumbbell shoulder press in there. I think like
Yeah.
military press or like Smith machine shoulder press, I feel like that restricts form too much or restricts range of motion. While with like a dumbbell shoulder press, you can get like a nice range of motion, bring the dumbbell properly overhead and get a better contraction, and also a better stretch as well at the bottom of the movement. Lying down leg curl. So I would agree because I do not believe that squats alone are enough of a full lower body exercise, which is what he sort of presented it as. So I definitely think there needs to be some sort of hamstring exercise in there. I personally get a better connection with a lying down leg curl than I do with a seated leg curl. So
Okay.
yeah, I'm not opposed to that being in there. And I also rate that he's thrown in there some calf raises as well. I mean, he's not particularly known for his calves. Obviously, he's a men's physique athlete, so he doesn't need to be known for his calves. It's not something that will make my list because of personally, I managed to survive 10 or so years without training calves and genetically reasonably blessed in that department. Not hugely, but reasonably. So yeah, something that I would neglect in my top 10 list. And then he's finished off with overhead cable tricep extensions with the rope, which I think is a great exercise. Yeah, I've got no qualms with that whatsoever. And then close grip pull-ups. So I mean, what is interesting there is there's no like pull down exercise or anything like that. There's nothing where he's got like a high level of stability and engaging his lats. There's also no like upper back row movement. I guess like the barbell is the closest he's got there. So Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, really. I mean, yeah, it is interesting.
Yeah, I think personally, hanging leg raises, I don't agree with them because I just feel it all in my shoulders, and that's probably just because I've been doing them when I've been heavier. So yeah, my shoulders just aren't comfortable doing them, but they're a fantastic exercise. If I can do them in the kind of tricep dip machine where I don't have to hang with my shoulders, then that's absolutely fine. It does work. But yeah, it's just not for me, unfortunately. I definitely agree with a lot of other things he's included: incline dumbbell bench press, dumbbell shoulder press. Anything with dumbbells is generally going to be good, and especially dumbbell shoulder press is just more comfortable, and it does feel good, like lifting a shit ton of weight over your head, but also just getting them into the position that you need to press. It just makes you feel something special. I'm gonna go on a different track with the lying leg curls. Similar to you, I feel a good contraction, but there does come a point where I can't overload it as much until my lower back kicks in. So that's where the seated hamstring curl trumps it for me. Absolutely, including a hamstring exercises, it works, and I would agree with one of them. But I think if I had the choice, I would go with a seated hamstring curl over a lying leg curl, just because I personally see it done wrong more times than I see it done right. And for me, once I do get to a certain threshold, again, my lower back just kicks in and it then takes away from the hamstrings. But that's just down to a personal technique issue. And if I drop the weight and actually keep the technique consistent, then it's a fantastic movement and does train the hamstrings in their shortened position. Seat calf raises, yeah, there's no real issue with that. It's training your calves. Not many people do. So the fact he has actually included that in there is commendable. Overhead cable tricep extensions is interesting. So he's getting a lot of stimulus in the stretched position from the barbell bench press and the incline double bench press and the dumbbell shoulder press. So I'm surprised that there's not a shortened tricep movement in there. But if it works for him, then it absolutely works. And close grip pull-ups, that seems to be or pull-ups in general, sorry, seem to be a common occurrence across the upcoming athletes that we are discussing. So yeah, maybe we're missing the trick. I feel like there would be limitations in terms of overloading that, but also it does just feel good to do a pull-up. So yeah, that's not an issue from my perspective. I would just have an alternative based on personal preference.
So we will now go on to Chris Bumstead, who arguably has the best physique of all time. Certainly the best classic physique of all time. He's obviously the Mr. Olympia in that division and has reigned supreme for a very long time. And yeah, is pretty much daddy to any gym goer in the space. So we will run for his 10 exercises. So he starts off with a barbell back squat. Again, which is quite interesting. He then starts off with a deadlift again. So he's then got neutral grip pull-ups, so another pull-up. Incline dumbbell bench press. So this is pretty much the same as Ryan Terry's, just in a different order. Then he's got a seated dumbbell shoulder press, so the same as Ryan Terry's. Close grip barbell bench press. And he's got dumbbell bicep curls, bent over row, a hanging leg raise, and then a lateral raise or a tricep extension. So that's quite interesting because obviously there's a lot of carryover there. So barbell squats the same, barbell deadlift the same, pull-ups is the same in terms of the neutral grip. So Ryan just refers to it as a close grip. The incline dumbbell bench press is the same. Seated dumbbell shoulder press is the same. The close grip barbell bench press. So you've still got about barbell bench press in there. So very similar. He's then included obviously the dumbbell bicep curl and then bent. So what I do like about Chris Bumstead is he's obviously got the bent over row in there. So that's
Yeah.
going to target a bit more upper back, which I think is great. Again, I don't think we need to have the deadlift in there. I would actually just prefer the bent over row on its own. I think you would get enough erector stimulus using that. I mean, who really wants a massively chunky erectors, to be honest? Like, I'd rather have a big, thick upper back than like these really thick erectors at the base of my spine. He's also got the hanging leg raise in there, though. So that's 2 out of 2 for that exercise. And then I do appreciate how he's got a lateral raise exercise for the side delts as well. So yeah, I'm probably more in line with Chris Bumstead's, to be honest, at the minute, but it is interesting how much carryover there is between them.
Yeah, like obviously we are amateurs to say the least when we compare to these guys, but there is a lot of carryover. Maybe you could attribute some of it to their enhanced status and they don't need much stimulus to get the result that they're looking for. And obviously it's worked for them, so obviously they've got something to show for it. But there is a lot of carryover, and it's quite interesting to see like the first 5, 6 exercises are pretty much identical: pull-ups, bench press, shoulder press, deadlifts. Obviously, it's a lot of compound movements, but maybe that's just from a simplicity perspective. I'm not sure of their coaching abilities. But yeah, from a biomechanical perspective, there is definitely better movements out there. And from a Gen Pop perspective, a lot of Gen Pop people wouldn't need to do this and could get better from elsewhere. It's quite interesting what you said about the bent over row with the erectors. You look at someone like JP, he absolutely slams erector exercises, and yeah, his erectors are pretty chunky to say the least. But I think a bent over row does absolutely work in there, and I think you could absolutely swap out the barbell deadlift because just from a central nervous system perspective, the bent over row is going to be better for you and is going to be less fatiguing overall as opposed to the deadlift. So yeah, and the hanging leg raise again, maybe I'm missing a trick here. I do have an alternative exercise that works for me, but maybe I need to bring some hanging leg raises in to develop my midsection. Maybe that's what I'm missing. And yeah, 100% agree. Overhead tricep extension again. And similar to Ryan Terry, he's getting a lot of stimulus in that stretched position from the bench presses and the shoulder press. So interesting. I'm not sure of the justification for that, but if it works for him, then it absolutely works because he is the classic god at the moment.
I do really like in Chris Bumstead's how he's actually got a dumbbell bicep curl. So he's actually got a bicep specific exercise, while Ryan Terry's justification for biceps is he's going to be targeting them through close grip pull-ups, which is definitely a compound exercise and doesn't purely target biceps. I do think a dumbbell bicep curl, though, is probably one of my least favorite bicep exercises. I definitely think there's a lot more ones that we can have a lot more stability in, which we can get a better contraction. Like, I just really don't feel a massive contraction. I feel a better contraction with an Arnold curl. So when you supinate or rotate your wrist at the top of the movement, for sure, that gives me a better contraction. I feel a better contraction still with a preacher curl. That's something that I really do notice as a contraction. Also, I feel like the stability and stretch that you get on a preacher curl is much better. So a dumbbell bicep curl wouldn't make my top 10 list.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that he has got a specific dumbbell bicep curl movement in there on top of the pull-ups as well. So obviously it's going to work to some extent, but you are getting a lot of stimulus from the likes of the pull-ups, the bent over row, and the bicep curl as well. So maybe it's not necessary, but maybe he was just struggling for different things to choose. But there is definitely better options out there, and I just don't feel like there's been a lot of thought process put into this. Maybe he's actually doing all of these, but I can't imagine that he's actually doing all of them. Maybe it's just like what he thinks is best. But yeah, it's quite interesting to see his perspective from that.
I'd probably say that for context, obviously these guys have been put on the spot on a podcast while we've had a little bit more time to kind of mull it over and think about it. So they're probably just gone for the top 10 exercises which come to their straight to their mind. So it's fair enough they haven't really gone away and researched it properly. So let's move on to Phil Heath then. So obviously the greatest Mr. Olympia of all time in the bodybuilding division. Second to Ronnie Coleman. Let me just make sure I correct that on the pod. So obviously Phil Heath is known as the Gift for his genetics. So a really, really talented bodybuilder and someone who's obviously was top of the game for a very, very long time. Dethroned obviously Jay Cutler. And was successful for a very long period. So his top 10 exercises are incline dumbbell press. So again, we've got an incline dumbbell press, standing dumbbell lateral raises. So we've got another lateral raise in there, same as Chris Bumstead. One arm preacher curls, big fan of that one. He's got a hack squat in there. Again, a big fan of that. He's got rope face pulls, which I'd question the ability to, use that to build muscle, but definitely a good exercise for shoulder health. So, but with the optimizing for muscle building here, that's probably a questionable one. Then he's got a rope tricep extension. He's got an incline dumbbell fly. So he's actually got a fly there for his chest as well. He's then got an underhand bent over barbell row. Big fan of that as well. He's got an overhand wide grip pull up. So we've got another pull up in there, which is interesting. And then he's got the step mill, that key exercise that absolutely blows up your lower body. stay away from the step mill if you don't want to get too big.
Yeah, the booty influencers of Instagram might be coming for you for that compliment. That comment. It's definitely not a muscle building exercise, so it's quite interesting why he's put that in there. Maybe it was just in case he ran out of ideas and he was like, yeah, let's throw a cardio exercise in. I mean, technically it is a gym exercise, but from a hypertrophy perspective, obviously that was his main focus. It is obviously not necessary, but I'm a big fan of Phil's list overall. There seems like a lot more specific movements, and there's a lot of variety in there in terms of like it's not just compound lifts, it's not just the fundamentals. There is a range of things in there. One arm preacher curls, hack squats. There's a lot of variety, and it's quite interesting that he has included a dumbbell fly as well as an incline dumbbell press. So he's getting a variety of chest exercises in there. But yeah, I think the face pulls probably aren't necessary. And we know if you get to a certain point where you are fatigued, your ability to then overload that is limited because you're just going to be thrusting into it. You're going to be using a lot of momentum, and it's just not really that effective. But again, there is a lot of carryover. We've got some bent over barbell rows, and pull ups again. So maybe we are missing the trick and not getting some pull ups and barbell rows in. I mean, I personally don't have barbell rows, but I know you have done in the past. But yeah, it's quite a interesting comparison across all of them. Obviously, all of them are very successful in their careers, but from a programming perspective, 10 best exercises, some of them, yes, others, there's probably better out there.
Yeah, I'd definitely say that Phil Heath's probably closest to what I would expect in terms of the exercise selection there. So, like hack squats, for example, that's like a really specific movement, which is excellent for added building muscle and doesn't really cause injury. Or most people can perform a hack squat, whilst most people can't perform a barbell back squat. So that's, for example, one that I'd really definitely agree with. Just in that he's got dumbbell flies as well as incline bench press or incline dumbbell press in there. I wouldn't necessarily have that. But I do like how he's gone for incline chest exercises. So I think that's clear focus from him there as well. So he's consciously thought, okay, rather than doing flat exercises, let's just go for incline exercises. In fact, he's doubled up on that. So I completely agree with that. Also, like the specificity when it comes to the bent over row, the fact that it's underhand, so you're going to get more lat engagement with that as well, rather than overhand bent over row. And there's definitely going to be some erector work in there. There's finally no deadlifts, which is great because deadlifts are arguably one of the worst exercises for hypertrophy. So yeah, I think there's a reason why they call Phil Heath, the gift, and the reason why he's won all those Olympias is because he actually has a good understanding of what he's on about there. And yeah, he's chosen some really good exercises. The step mill is obviously the ultimate question mark, really, there for me. But yeah, I definitely feel like out of all of the exercises, he's the one that's probably taken a bit more time to really think about building the muscle rather than just exercises which are just good for like general population or strength exercises. His is very specific to bodybuilding.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the step mill is crying out to me. I personally don't enjoy it, but it's quite interesting because I don't know if you're the same, but I accumulate a lot of fatigue when I do that. Within 5 minutes, my quads and my lower back have blown up, and I'm huffing, I'm puffing, everything just hurts. So it's just not an enjoyable thing. And even if it is in there as one of the best exercises of all time, from a cardiovascular perspective and just an enjoyment perspective, there's probably better out there. Like realistically, who wants to walk upstairs for 40 minutes plus? Not me. And I'm going to choose something that's better overall. But yeah, from a resistance training element, it probably shouldn't be in there because there's very little resistance training. Although I do still see a lot of girls on the step mill doing the kickbacks, walking sideways, you name it. They're doing the typical booty influencer exercises, and it's just very questionable. So maybe Phil Heath is doing them, but I imagine that's just from a cardiovascular perspective.
I mean, one thing to be fair to the step mill is it does create the best motivational montage videos. Like you don't see someone on a cross trainer and like watch them in like slow motion when it's black and white and there's some like motivational music. It's just not the same. There's no testosterone being elevated there. It's just not the same impact. While if you see someone on the step mill, they're absolutely sweating it out. They've got like the towel over their head. They're hunched over it. They're going up there. That's the sort of stuff that probably in his generation of bodybuilders they did, and like it's great content. Like I absolutely love consuming that sort of stuff, but for muscle building it's going to be a no from me.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are a big fan of the motivational gym content. So maybe it's a case we need to start incorporating it and start pumping out some motivation content. But yeah, for now, it's just not necessary. But I'm definitely more in alignment with Phil Heath's list just because there's a lot of I'm going to say it's shit exercises in Ryan Terry's and Chris Bumstead's list that could be better and could offer more individual variability and just more stability and just more comfort overall. Because ultimately, if you're doing something you hate, you're not going to do it long term. Enjoyment is the number one thing for adherence. And maybe they've put them in there because they enjoy them. But I think a lot of people, Gen Pop in particular, could get a lot of enjoyment from other exercises and less risk and less fatigue and just better stimulus overall.
Yeah, completely agree. Right, so this is where the fun begins, as Anakin Skywalker would say in one of the best movies of all time, Revenge of the Sith. So I am now going to go through my top 10 exercises. So just to be clear with these exercises, these are based on my personal like mind muscle connection with these exercises, how I feel the stretch and contraction with these exercises, how I prefer I've considered sort of range of motion of these exercises, and it really comes down to sort of my biomechanics, my enjoyment, and I've considered my genetics as well. So, for example, there's no calves in there. Shock, because I've got pretty decent calves off the bat. So my 10 exercises then. So the first one I've got in there is a leg raise. So this is obviously your abdominal exercise. I've gone with a leg raise, but I could go for a hanging leg raise as well. I think they've both got their part to play. I've gone with a leg raise because it adds more stability. So I sometimes find with a hanging leg raise, my they're basically the hips can be engaged a bit more rather than sort of the lower abs. So it's kind of a bit of a sign of personal preference. So I definitely feel like you can still progressively overload with a leg raise. So this is one that I'm referring to as in like a Roman chair is like the piece of equipment called where you kind of sit yourself upright. You can do dips on the side of it as well. So that's the leg raise. That it's not like a lying down leg raise that I'm referring to. So that's the exercise that I would go for abs, and that's the main exercise, that the only exercise that I've got in there for abs, to be fair. Then I've gone with an incline Smith press. So the reason why I've gone with an incline Smith press is I personally feel I get a much greater stretch on this exercise versus a dumbbell press. A dumbbell press is definitely slightly more enjoyable. It's something you feel more like Neanderthal moving around some large rocks. But while on a Smith press is a bit more stabilized, which is good. That's a really good point because it means that you can push yourself harder and closer to failure, less risk of injury. I also feel that the fact that there's a straight line in terms of the range of motion, or in terms of the movement, means that if you can line it up perfectly with your chest fibers, that you can get like a really nice stretch at the bottom and then a decent contraction at the top. Arguably not as good as a dumbbell chest press or like a D handle incline chest press because of you're not going to get your arms fully across in front of your or straight directly above your chest because there's obviously going to be that restriction because you're on Smith press, but still something that definitely feel like that I've definitely benefited from. Then I've gone with a cable lat pull down. So to be specific with this, I'm treating this to I want to stretch out in front of me as far as I can, and then I want to kind of pull back it towards sort of my pocket. So it's not like a lat pull down where I'm going kind of like above my head and then down. I'm going in front of me, trying to get a full stretch in my like mid to lower lats, and then coming back down. I'm happy to do it unilaterally or dual handed if possible, but that's definitely something that I feel really engages those lower lats. I'm tossing up here between a T-bar row or an incline dumbbell row. My logic here is I'm trying to pick an exercise which has a lot of stability in it. And targets the mid back basically, so it's like elbows flared row there as well. So we're getting like a lot of rhomboids, mid traps, that sort of level of engagement there. So those are potentially interchangeable. I'd probably lean a bit more towards maybe a T-bar row because you've got a bit more stability with that. You also get a wicked stretch on that exercise. And then I've gone for a dumbbell shoulder press. So obviously this is echoed in all three of, I believe it's all three as well. I just remember if it's Phil Heath. Yeah, so I think it's in Phil Heath's as well.
Yeah.
No, sorry, it's not in Phil Heath. He actually doesn't have a dumbbell overhead press, which is
Oh no,
interesting. Dumbbell shoulder
it's in
press.
Ryan.
But it's certainly in Ryan Terry's and in Chris Bumstead's. So the reason I've gone with a dumbbell shoulder press rather than like a Smith shoulder press press or military press is, it's kind of said at the start of the pod, is you just get such a better range of motion with a dumbbell shoulder press. And again, the level of enjoyment for myself is quite high because, you move into heavy dumbbells, like that's just good fun. If you can get to like 40 kilo dumbbells, move those for like 7 to 8 reps, like, you throw those down and you feel pretty good about yourself. And then I've gone with, for my lower body exercise, I've gone with a lunge. So like probably preferably a dumbbell lunge is what I would probably typically go for, but I'd be open for a barbell lunge. But I personally feel like barbell lunges probably end up putting a bit too much weight on your lower back and can cause a bit of discomfort there. But the reason why I've gone for a lunge is because I feel like that has the best glute activation, and it also has really strong quad activation as well. And the sort of the lactate buildup in there is, and the metabolite sort of stress is really high, and I get a massive pump whenever I do lunges, and specifically like in my quads and glutes. And then I've then gone for a preacher curl for my bicep exercise. I think a preacher curl is like one of the best bicep exercises. Get such a nice squeeze on it. You've got a good level of stability. You go in slow on that eccentric rep, really stretching out over the cushion, over the pad. So you're getting that stretch in there as well. And yeah, absolutely love a preacher curl. Open to doing it either on a machine if you've got the right sort of angles in there. So I don't necessarily want to do it on like I want to do it with like a slightly internally rotated wrist position. That's how I feel most comfortable. So slightly supinated rather than sort of twisted more towards neutral. For a tricep exercise, I've gone with a tricep rope extension. So that would be like a long rope tricep extension. So we've got no internal rotation of the shoulder. We can get a full extension of the elbow in both sides at the same time. And that's an exercise that I personally connect really well with. And then for a hamstring exercise to round off the leg exercises, I've gone for a lying down leg curl. So the seated leg curl, I just never feel like I can get a really good contraction on it. Like I can get a good stretch and I can get a reasonable squeeze, but it's not, I don't get a really like nice mind muscle sort of connection to that exercise. While with a lying down leg curl, I can really feel the stretch. I can really feel the contraction. Yes, it's harder to overload. I'd agree with your point that you mentioned earlier. However, that's an exercise that I find I have a great connection with. Also get a bit more glute engagement in there as well. I have zero lower back issues with that exercise, fortunately for myself. And then to finish it off, the most important muscles in the body is the lateral delts. So we've got the D-handle lateral raises. Getting a nice, I would do these unilaterally. So you get a nice full range of motion. You're bringing the handle right across the front of your body, so it goes right past your midline and then come all the way back out. So we're getting a nice full stretch, full contraction in there. Obviously on a cable stack, you wouldn't have the cable stack at the bottom. You'd have it set sort of like at knee height or so. So we're getting working it through the whole biomechanical range, and that's something, again, another exercise that I connect really well with. Keen to hear your thoughts on that, mate.
Yeah, it's quite interesting compared to my list. Obviously, I'll get onto that shortly, but there is a lot of carryover from a lot of the exercises stated above. No deadlifts, no barbell squats or anything like that, which is good to see. Leg raises, obviously, that's personal preference. As you said, lying down, leg curl, again, personal preference. And if you enjoy it more, then I think that's more important than if it's optimal. But I think, the seated hamstring curl and the lying leg curl, they both have their place. It's just what you actually prefer and what you have time for. So yeah, they're both training the hamstrings, no issues at all. You've gone more down the route of specific muscles, so there's not like a compound, obviously the lunge kind of is, but it's not like a squat, a pendulum squat, a hat squat, leg press, that kind of thing. So yeah, that's quite interesting, but obviously it works. You get glutes and quads in there. Obviously there's less quad in the shortened position, but you do get a lot of stretch in the glutes, so that is fantastic. I'm torn up between my list, so I do want to make some changes, but I'm going to leave it as it is for now. But yeah, there is a lot of crossover with my list, but also with Phil Heath's list. And I completely agree with what you said in terms of the dumbbell shoulder press and just like lifting a ton of weight. When you do get to the 40s, I feel like that is quite a big milestone, because even just getting them into the position, but then you do a few reps, you drop them on the ground, you just feel just fantastic. Like there's very few feelings that can match that, but there is a lot of interesting points in there, like tricep rope extension, obviously lining up the shoulders so there's less internal rotation. D-handle lateral raise, I do have an alternative for that, but it's good to see a lateral raise in there. But yeah, overall it is more conducive, I would say, for hypertrophy, but also just for individuality, biomechanical needs, and there's less fatigue in a lot of these, which is, I think, is the most important thing, particularly with things like the Smith press. You don't have to brace as much as if you were doing an incline dumbbell press, for example. Cable lat pull down, you can really lock in for that, which is fantastic. I do really enjoy that. Whether you're doing it single arm or double arm with a lat pull down, for example, with the two separate cables, you know, you can really lock in with the knee pad, or if you're using a bench, you can brace against it, which works really well. The T-bar row and the incline dumbbell row, I personally never got on with the incline dumbbell row. I just couldn't really get a good contraction, so I would lean more to the T-bar row. And I'll get onto that shortly. But yeah, it is a very good list. Obviously, there is still more to choose from, and there's probably exercises that you would have wanted to include in there. But I think that's a good selection. And if you were to do that program with all of those exercises in there, you're probably going to be hitting everything that you need to, aside from carbs. But obviously, you've already discussed that.
I'd say if I was to be like sort of self-critical of my list and kind of reflect over it, yeah, we'll definitely take out the incline dumbbell row. So we'll just leave in the T-bar row for sure. I think that's you get a better stretch, better contraction there. I would say I tossed it with the idea of getting a quad extension in there because obviously then you're getting the quads in the shortened range. But for me personally, I've never really had an issue like growing legs. Like so this is again my personal list. So that's why I've always sort of stuck with lunges. I feel like it's such a good glute contraction on lunges, especially if they're like walking lunges. I feel like that's kind of my favorite there. So I've had to kind of pick the exercise which is best bang for buck. So definitely feel like that one's in there as well. Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be personal preference. So I'm really interested to hear yours, man. So yeah, throw your 10 out there.
Yeah, let's get onto it. So, my 10 best exercises. So, there is a lot of carryover with Jason, so that's always good to see that we're along the same lines. So, starting off, we've got an incline dumbbell chest press, just because it's comfortable, it targets that top line, and I feel it's better than a flat dumbbell press. But also, it just works for me, and I enjoy it. I can really get a good elbow position, shoulders are in a good place, and I can control the movement a lot more. And also, it's nice to get a good squeeze at the top. And I was torn up between doing this and an incline Smith press, but I just think from a shoulder health perspective, me personally, I don't enjoy it. Whereas the dumbbell chest press, I can really tuck my elbows in and just make it more suitable for me. Then I've got a cuffed cable fly. So I do have a fly movement in here. Jason doesn't, but obviously it's just down to personal preference. And being cuffed, you can take the wrist and the elbow out of the equation. So that kind of makes it a little bit more comfortable. And I feel I can push myself to fatigue a little bit easier. Whereas if I did actually have a pec fly in here, but I just felt that the cuffed cable fly was better. I noticed with the pec fly, my bicep does kick in quite a lot, and that generally fatigues first, and then my chest is still got loads of reps left. Whereas having the cuff in there eliminates that. And yeah, also having cables, there's not constant tension, which a lot of people think there is. There's just a varying amount of tension through the entire movement. So yeah, it's nice to have that feeling, and you can get an unbelievable squeeze because the cuff on your, like, just above your elbow, you can really bring your upper arm across your midline. Whereas with a pec fly, for example, you're limited by your hand position. So yeah, that's one reason why I've gone for that. Then, similar to Jason, unilateral D handle pull down. So that's the same as the cable lat pull down where you're reaching out in front of you. I just feel you can get a really good stretch. You can brace really well and stabilize fantastically, but you can also tuck that elbow into your pocket and get a good contraction with that. So for me, that's a fantastic lat movement. And yeah, it just works well overall. Similarly with the cable movement, again, there is varying amounts of tension in the exercise, and it just works for me. When I first started doing that, I think it was cuffed and then it was supersetted with a D handle pull down. So it's like cuff at the elbow, go to failure, and then onto the D handle. But I just stuck with D handle for now. Then T-bar row again. Similar to Jason, that's just to get the upper back movement. Obviously, we've got a lot of lat stimulation from the pull down, so there's a lot of lacking upper back stimulus in there, and there probably is better movements out there, but it just feels good from a stretch perspective, and also just loading up some weight on a T-bar row, it feels very strong. That's the only word I can associate it with. Breathing is a bit difficult with the chest pad, but all it takes is have a breather, take 1 to 2 breaths in, and then yeah, if you need to, you can use a bit of momentum, but just using the muscles that you're trying to target and just rinsing them for everything they've got is the best way to go. Then I've gone a different route. So a lying cuff lateral raise as opposed to Jason's D handle lateral raise. So some lateral raise movement in there. I just personally find, again, with the cuffs, it takes the wrist and the elbow out of the equation. And once I reach that point where it's fatiguing, the pump in my delts is unbelievable. You can get a bit of external rotation in there, so it's good to train that position anyway for shoulder health. But again, with the cables, it allows for a variety of tension throughout the movement, and for me, it just works better. Although I do get a really good stretch with a D handle lat raise, but instead of the D handle, I just stick a cuff on the wrist because it's just more comfortable and grip is less of an issue. Then a dumbbell shoulder press. So exactly the same reason. It's just nice to lift a lot of weight overhead, and it does just make you feel a bit superhuman when you're lifting like the equivalent of an average male or female above your head. Repping out 40s for 6 to 8 reps is something that a lot of people can't do, and even just getting them into the position, that is quite a interesting movement, and there's a lot of shaking, there's a lot of funny faces, but for me, I just feel like I get a really good stretch, and then I kind of get a balance of the contracted position from the cuff lateral raises and then the stretch position from the shoulder press. Now, I've gone a different route with the bicep movement, so I went for a behind the back cable curl, seated specifically. So seated for stability, the cables aren't pulling backwards, and then behind the back cable curl, ideally, it gets the biceps in a stretched position, but you can get them into the short position if you move your upper arm into that flexed position. And then once you've rinsed that part for everything it's got, you can then move into the lengthened position and then again rinse that for everything you've got. So for me, I personally get a really good contraction from that. Obviously, there probably is better movements out there, but that's just one thing that I really enjoy, and the pump from that just feels nice. The cables, you can line them up really well and change obviously the height, and it just works for me. Then similar to that, dual rope pushdowns, so lining up the shoulders and the elbows a little bit more, getting more range of motion, so allowing your hands to come past your body and actually extending the elbow fully, whereas just with a single rope it doesn't quite work. But because we're getting a lot of stretched stimulus from the cable press and the shoulder press, I just feel getting it in the contracted position from the dual rope pushdown works better for me. Now, this one was a bit of a hard decision to make because I absolutely love a leg day, and I've gone very upper body heavy with my selection. So we're 8 exercises in now, but I've gone for a hack squat. I remember the first time I did a hack squat, I just thought this was horrible. It's not going to work for me. But now that I've built up to a previous PB of around 200 kilos, it just feels nice. Like to have that lower back removed from a squat and be able to load the living shit out of your quads, it just feels really good. You can play around with frictions, moving your feet around, and different resultants. Obviously, we're getting very into like the biomechanics element there, and you can feel more of a quad stimulus if you do that. But just from a movement perspective, a comfort perspective, and also stretching the quads, it just feels nice. I did have a seated hamstring curl in there. I would also like a leg extension in there, but we can't have everything. So I just felt hack squats for me, they covered everything I wanted to from an enjoyment perspective, but I'm aware I am lacking some leg development there. But legs, they're always something that I've enjoyed more. I'm typically stronger with my legs, so for me it was just better to lean into more upper body exercises. Then to round things off, obviously we can't forget our abs. That's something I've done in previous years, but a lying abdominal crunch with a ab mat underneath your lower back, so really stretching out the abs when you're in that laying position, and then literally just contracting them to bring your upper body up and really flex that spine into that crunch position. So yeah, for me, I found that's worked for me, and I still get it to this day, but if I push myself to failure, my abs are cramping so hard. So that's probably why I've gone for that. As I've said previously, I don't really enjoy leg raises. If it's a hanging leg raise, then I just get a lot of shoulder stimulation. It's just not comfortable. And then if it's the Roman chair, like Jason suggested, for me, I just feel hip flexors for that entire movement, and it just doesn't work. So lying abdominal crunch or some variation of a crunch, it just feels nice to get that contraction. Obviously, it's good to get a whole range of contraction, which you're limited kind of with the lying abdominal crunch if you can't fully extend over the mat, but for me that's just what I'm most comfortable with. So that is my 10 exercises. It'd be interesting to get your thoughts on that, Jason.
Bro doesn't want any hamstrings. That's my thoughts on that. Like, the hack squat is a fantastic leg exercise. but there's zero hamstrings in there. You're going to get knee
Yeah.
issues galore long term on that. I mean, no one do Charlie's best 10 exercises. It's a terrible, it's a terrible program, the least balanced program ever. No, kidding. No, really, really agree with a lot of the exercises on this. So the incline dumbbell chest press, yeah, I mean it's almost identical to the Smith press. I've gone with the Smith press, feel a better stretch on that. I could have easily swapped in the incline dumbbell press. It's I might wake up tomorrow and change my mind on that one. Like, it's very, very close. Cuffed cable fly, to dedicate a whole exercise, 10% of these top 10 exercises to a cable fly. Like, this guy wants a chest. Like, that's wild. I'm guessing that's seated, and then it's got the cuffs in there, so you've got some stability. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Fine. Yeah, that's what I would have thought, because you want that stability in there. Yeah, I mean, I have to hold my hand up and say, like, I'm not the biggest or most experienced person when it comes to cuffed exercises. So yeah, I definitely need to dabble a little bit more in that to give it a go. But I agree with the logic that if you had a pec fly in there, I find pec flies engage my biceps too much. Certainly when I go heavy, and therefore they take away from the chest. So yeah, sounds like a great exercise. I just think it's quite wild that you've dedicated a whole exercise to a fly. You and Phil Heath, absolute animals when it comes to chest development. Um,
Hey, next
the
Mr.
D handle
Olympia.
lateral pull down. Yeah, exactly. That's it. You're going to be next Mr. Olympia. That's the key, isn't it? Really, you want to stretch out that chest. The D handle lateral pull down. Yeah, I completely agree with that. Great exercise. Enough said. T-bar row. Enough said. Talked about that. Lying cuffed lateral raises. So yeah, I mean, I can agree with that. I definitely see the benefit of having the cuff in there. The question, I guess, for myself would be, these aren't done unilaterally, so you're doing both arms at the same time. Does that is that I find that I've tried them before. I find it can be quite awkward with the cable, like sort of the cables crossing over in terms of the attachments there. Is that something that you've experienced?
Yeah, so when I first started doing these, that was quite frustrating because I had the cuff at the wrist and you can't get a full range of motion because you do get to that point where the little balls start crossing over. So having the cuff at the elbow does limit that to a certain extent. But again, you bring your elbows close together and you're then crossing the cable. So that's one thing that's annoying about that. But from a contraction perspective, it does feel really good. So once you're moving your arms away, then that does negate it. And it's a really good movement overall.
Fair enough. Dumbbell shoulder press, caveman exercise. No, no qualms here. Absolute awesome exercise. Behind the back cable curls. I mean, I just don't feel like I can get a really nice, sweet contraction of my bicep when I do that exercise. Like, I get a great stretch, and I can see the benefit if you adjust the form and you can kind of bring the bring the shoulder into it a little bit more and get that elevation to then shorten the bicep. Yeah, I mean, by that logic, you could potentially do like an overhead press at the end as well, and then hit your shoulders. It's just like, how much do we want to stretch what's possible in the realms of form here? If we're doing a strict behind the back cable curl, then by its nature of its name, then the arm needs to stay behind the back. So yeah, I can't accept the fact that you can also shorten it as well as lengthen it in the same movement. That's cheating, Charlie. So we're not
I
allowed
thought I'd
that.
get away with that.
The No, you're not getting away with that. The dual cable pushdowns, I think that's great. I completely agree with that. And then obviously hack squats, yeah, a great exercise. But there's zero hamstring development, like zero. So very concerned for your future, mate. And then the lying abdominal crunch. So I haven't done this exercise since the Brightman 12. Which was back in, I don't know if it was the OG one or the second one. But they programmed that for me, and yeah, great exercise. Really, really good exercise for your abs. Again, I cramp a lot on that as well. My only question with it really is are we going to get those nice like V lines on that exercise? So I don't feel like you're getting the lower ab development, while I feel like everyone can get 4-pack, but not everyone can get 6-pack. I think that's the challenge there. So that's kind of why I've biased the leg raises. But it's personal preference, is what I'd say overall. But yeah, definitely some majority of exercises I would agree with on that. But definitely a couple of questionable ones, which is fair enough. We're allowed to disagree. What's good for the pod, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, we like a bit of disagreement, and yeah, I completely agree. Allocating 10% of my selection to a fly is very rogue, but just from a contraction perspective, it does feel good. And obviously, we're not getting that with the dumbbell chest press, so I thought it was good to have that comparison. Then with the behind the back cable curls, so that was just like I was gonna try and get away with it because then we're working both ranges. But yeah, if we're staying strict to behind the back, it's probably not the best bicep exercise. But for me, it does feel nice to have that contraction. But if I was to reevaluate the list, I'd probably have more to choose from. I'd probably stretch it to 12 because I would like some more exercises in there, particularly for hamstrings. Because with my lower back issues, training hamstrings has really helped that. So yeah, I would love to have at least a seated hamstring curl in there, if not a dumbbell RDL or something, just to get the hamstrings working to some extent.
Shame that we didn't call the episode the top 12 exercises rather than top 10 best exercises. Hey ho, but maybe there's another pod out there somewhere which will do the top 12 best exercises, and you can get on that one. But we've set ourselves strict rules here, Charlie. Like we have to stick to the top 10 best exercises. So yeah, you're getting no hamstring development. I'll be enjoying some big hamstrings, and I'll be enjoying zero knee issues. So there's winners and losers when it comes to this, really.
That is true. I feel like you are winning, and there obviously is some crossover, but it's quite interesting. I mean, if I had the choice as well, I probably would include a Smith machine reverse lunge off a deficit. So that's something that's been recently added with this photo shoot prep. And similar to your reasons for the lunge, it's a great stretch on the glutes, and it just feels good overall. Like the pump from that is insane. But I've made my choice. I've made my bed essentially. I've got to lay in it. I would make some changes if I could, but I think most of my choices, there is a lot of crossover with yours as well, but there is some rogue choices in there as well. I think if you tried some of the cuffed exercises, you probably would enjoy them, but getting used to them and also setting them up can be a pain in the ass. So that's one thing that does let them down a little bit, but once you are used to setting them up, they're pretty solid exercises.
Excellent stuff. Well, yeah, appreciate your input there, Charlie. We'll wrap the episode up there because we've just gone over the hour mark. So there you go, guys. You've got the top 10 best exercises, not only from Phil Heath, Ryan Terry, Chris Bumstead, but also from me and Charlie. So now your life's complete. You can now, stress no more, and you can go into the gym and achieve a monumental amount of gains. Appreciate everyone listening. Thank you very much. Make sure we subscribe. Peace.
Peace out.
We'll stop there.